I'd also like to take a moment to thank you all here. In our very first video, we were incredibly pleased to receive quite a remarkably high number of likes and positive feedback from our viewers. For that, we extend our warmest greetings to everyone watching. Hello, everyone. We're here with the second lesson of our SPSS from Scratch series. In our first lesson, we got to know SPSS in general. We gave an overview of what you see on the screen right now. We had mentioned that we would be entering data into a blank screen in this lesson. The topic of this lesson is data entry into SPSS. In a moment, we'll delete all the information on the screen and start entering data from scratch. If you want to follow along with me, you'll need to download two files. First, the SPSS data file named DIRS1, which you see on the screen right now and which we worked on in the previous lesson. Second, the Excel file named DIRS2, which belongs to this lesson. You can find where to download these files in the video description. If you want to follow along, you can pause the video here and download the files. All right, I'm assuming you're ready, and I'm starting our lesson. For this, first I'd like to bring up our survey on the screen. We've brought our survey up on the screen. You don't have the survey because just seeing it on the screen will be enough. Here, the survey consists of different types of questions, and there might not be a very logical connection between them. I tried to include various types of questions in the survey, because we're just doing an example here. For instance, here there's a multiple choice question. Here, there's a question that can be answered with a short response. Again, there's another question here that can be answered briefly and openly. Here, there's a question with multiple selectable answers. And here, there's an example of a Likert type question, which we often include in our surveys. Now, we're going to enter the survey into SPSS. For this, first, we need to do a few things on the survey. The first step is, my suggestion is, let's assume this paper belongs to one participant. The participant has given the answers we see here. First, we take this paper in our hand and put a number on the top right or anywhere else on it. This way, we indicate that this is the paper of the first participant. Why did we do this? Because if we want to go back to a paper or a participant later, we can easily find this paper, this participant. Let's say we have some concerns about the answers of the 23rd participant. We might want to go back and take another look. We might want to check to see if we entered something incorrectly. For this reason, I recommend that you first assign a serial number to a corner of the paper. After this, what we need to do is to perform some operations on the options here. Here's what you do. Here we see the options as female and male. We write 1 next to the first option and 2 next to the second option. Like this, we come here and write 1 in front of it. And we write 2 in front of this one. Why did we do this? Because in a moment, when we enter the data, we'll write 1 wherever we see female and 2 wherever we see male. Here we see a short answer option. You don't need to do any coding like 1 or 2 here. We'll use the number 24 directly as the data entry. Here we see a question about education level. It's a multiple choice question similar to the gender question. The participant can give only one answer. So here as well, I recommend numbering the options starting from the left like this. We number them as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 like this. Let me write it a bit lower like this. Then let me write 5 here. Again, here we see options like single and married. We number these as 1 and 2 as well. I'd like to make a suggestion here. In many studies besides single and married, I see options like widowed, divorced, separated, living together but married, living together but single, and so on. I want to point this out here. If your study's purpose doesn't require this much detail, you shouldn't ask for such detailed answers. Here, I gave an example based on marital status. You can think about this for different questions as well. For the purpose of my study, it's enough for me to know whether someone is single or married. So, this many options are sufficient. I'm continuing. Here we see an answer like the district you live in. As we mentioned in our previous lesson, this is a variable of string type. So we will write this out verbally in a moment. We won't be doing any coding. But if we want to do coding, we can enter code numbers here. We won't be coding here. So I'm skipping this part. For the question about the sector you work in, I see 4 options again. We can enter the numbers like this, 1, 2, then right below here 3, and here 4. Then here you can select more than one option. We see a question that allows for multiple selections. For this question, we don't code as 1, 2, 3, 4. Because here, if the participant, for example, selects the first option, it's enough to enter 1 for that. If they didn't select it, we can enter 0 or leave it blank. In a moment, I will prefer to leave it blank. For example, let me write 1 here, If the participant selected Instagram, I will write one for that. If they also selected Twitter, I will write one for that as well. Here we see 9 liker type questions. What does a liker type question mean? As you can see here, if the answers are given in a certain order, such as strongly disagree, disagree, neutral, agree, strongly agree, or for example, it could also be never, occasionally, sometimes, often, always, again with answers changing in a specific sequence. We call questions with answers like these liker type questions. Here, there is a 5-point liker type question, because there are 5 options. Here, we generally recommend using at least 5 options. If possible, I recommend using a 7-point scale, because when you use the 7-point scale, you can get clearer answers. Also, you won't have problems in future analyses like normal distribution. Normal distribution can be achieved more easily if you increase the number of options here. Yes, I'm getting into slightly different topics, but I want to offer some suggestions as they come to mind. Here, we already see the options as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We will enter the numbers we see here, so I don't feel the need to specify it here again. Yes, we've done our preliminary steps. What have we done so far? First, we assigned a number to our participant. Then, we numbered our options in a way that we can understand. Now, I'll move our survey to the right side of your screen, and the Excel file I want you to download to the left side of your screen. We'll first enter the data here into Excel. So, teacher, why aren't we entering it into SPSS? We were expecting to enter it into SPSS. I think it's easier to enter it into Excel first, because we can do certain adjustments, entries, and deletions much more easily. That's why let's enter it into Excel first. After that, we'll easily transfer it from there to SPSS in just one step anyway. Let's arrange our screen right away. You can fully place the Excel file on your screen. Yes, we've arranged our screen. On the right side, we have our survey. And on the left side, let's assume there's a blank Excel file. The first thing we need to do is give variable names to the questions we see here. We talked about these in our previous lesson. I found it appropriate to give the names like this. First, I gave the variable name ID for the participant number. Then I wrote sinus YT for gender and YAS for age. For education level, I thought it appropriate to use the variable name org_DZY. And finally, for the last part, I made definitions like YDO1, YDO2 here. The scale here is a completely hypothetical scale. I prepared these just as an example. There is no such scale. Let's assume that this is called the managerial behavior scale. Managerial behavior scale. I wrote 9 questions here about managers' behaviors, and as an abbreviation, I called them managerial behavior scale question 1. I used abbreviations like YDO1, YDO2. After making these abbreviations and writing the short names of our variables like this, what we need to do now is select all of them like this. And just like you see on the screen, let me select them like this. We can right-click and choose copy. Then, if we go to a 1 like this, right-click and then click on this icon here, the transpose icon, we'll see that they've been pasted from left to right at the top like this. This makes things a lot easier for us. After doing this, we'll be able to transfer our data to SPSS very easily in a moment. Then we can delete what we wrote here, and after that, by selecting everything and double-clicking anywhere, we can shrink these cells like this. Yes, all our variables have now appeared here in a way similar to SPSS. What we need to do next is to enter each participant one by one into each row. We had already specified which codes we would enter here. First, we'll enter the first participant here, and then the second participant right below them. If we select like this and do it this way, we can automatically assign a number to each participant as we go down. Next is gender. Here it's marked as female, so 1. Then the age is 24, university graduate, so I need to enter 5. I'm looking at the survey on one side and entering the data on the other. Marital status is marked as 1. Then we write the place of residence as Sile. I'd like to make a suggestion here as well. If you write it like this, for example, writing Sile starting with a lowercase letter for one person, and for another, write with a capital letter, like, in other words, if you use different spellings, you might run into a lot of problems later on. That's why it's very important to enter it the same way every time. I just wanted to point that out here. The sector they work in is the second sector, it's sector number 2. Then, this participant has Instagram and X accounts. I'm writing them down one by one. They don't have Facebook or TikTok, so I'm skipping those. There's no need to write 0, but if you want, you can write 0 as well. Then 5353. We proceed like this. 53, then 53, then for 132. for 1, 3, 2, and then 4. We enter it like this. Yes, we take each participant's paper in our hands. We enter them one by one into the rows like this. Here in the video, I won't be entering them one by one. As you can see down here, there is a tab called Dalu. I'm switching to the Dalu tab from here, and when I do, I see that there are sample data already entered and ready. Let's assume I've completed data entry for 120 participants. After this, I can easily transfer these to SPSS. I can enter the data into SPSS. But before that, there's one more thing I need to do. Again, I'm switching to the other screen. We take the names of the variables over here. We select them like this. Again, we right-click and select copy. Then we go to a blank spot, somewhere that won't change the data. We right-click on it and then click on transpose again. We want to see the names of the variables listed one below the other here, because in a moment on the SPSS screen in the variable view, we'll need to enter these variables one under the other. This way, we're preparing it here in advance easily. After that, we right-click on it, select copy, and go to the variable view screen in SPSS. I'm also bringing up the SPSS data file on my screen, and then we'll paste it there. Yes, we've brought up the data file we worked on in our previous lesson. I wanted to leave a space. Come here, right-click, and paste it by selecting Paste. But we've run into a problem. It's actually good that we encountered this problem. It says, this variable name duplicates an existing variable name. In other words, it's saying that there's a variable with the same name as an existing variable in the place where you want to paste. I can't give the same name to two different variables. So what we need to do is, let's first delete it. Actually, we were going to delete it later, but let's select all of these now. Let's right-click on them and select Clear. When we select Clear, we'll see that all the data in the Data tab has also been deleted. Now we've got a completely blank screen. Let's go back to the variable view again. Will it let us paste again? I'm not sure if Excel's memory is still holding it. I'm right-clicking. Yes, it looks like it is. We can see that all our variables have been pasted here. Now we can transfer our data to SPSS. But first, we need to do one more small step. We need to adjust the type settings here. We need to edit them. Among our data, there was a variable that was a string. The variable that was a string was the one for place of residence. We need to click on the numeric variable here and change it to string from this menu. And here, for example, we can enter the number of characters as 100, or as many as we want. After entering it like this, we click OK. If we hadn't done this, we would have had a problem when trying to paste the verbal string type variable into the file in a moment. If you want, you can try this yourself. We kept this in mind beforehand and changed it to string. All our other variables are numeric. There's no problem with those. Now, what we need to do is go to the Excel screen, copy all the data there, then come back here and paste it into the data view. I'm going to my Excel screen. Like this, I switch back to the Filled tab and select all the data here by scrolling down. Yes, I've reached the very end. There are 120 participants. I right-click on it, select Copy, and make sure this is selected and nothing gets messed up. I switch back to the SPSS screen. I've come back to the SPSS screen. I go to the first cell like this, right-click on it, and select Paste from here. When I click Paste, I see that all the data has been transferred to SPSS. Now, we're slowly coming to the end of this lesson. I switch back to the Variable View tab. I want to make some adjustments. The first adjustment I'll make here is to enter the names of the variables. For this, I first come over here. I write AI here. Right below that, I write gender. Below that, I write age. Under that, I write education level. And here, I'm going to speed up the video a bit and skip to the end. You can pause the video and complete the data entry yourself. Yes, I've finished entering the names of the variables here. I've written them all. Now, what needs to be done next is to write the variable codes here. For this, I'll bring the survey to the right side of my screen again and enter the data here. I've moved the survey to the right side of my screen. Now I can see all the codes. I'll start entering the codes with gender. For that, I come here. When I click here, a screen pops up. On this screen, it says Value Labels. In other words, value labels. First, we'll enter a value. Then we'll enter a label for this value. Our value is 1, and its label is female. We write female here like this. Then we click Add. What happens? 1 equals female. Then we write 2, and as its label, we write male here, And then again, we click add. Again, what happened? 2 equals male. After finishing this, now we can click OK. Then I move on to age. I won't enter any coding for age because the age itself will be used directly in the data. I'm moving on to education level like this. I write one here. What is the label for our first code? Illiterate. Then I click add. In this way, I need to complete the data entry for all the variables here. I'll go ahead and complete all of these again. You can pause here if you want, or you can complete them as well. Let's continue afterwards. All right, I've entered the data up to this point. There are just a couple of points I want to show you here. The first of these is about the question, does the person have an Instagram account? Let me show you. I entered it as 1 to indicate yes. If it's left blank, it already means no. That's how I entered it. Then, if I say copy for the operation I did here, I can select over here and say paste. When I do this, I can see that the operation I performed here has also been applied to the rows over there. I'm going to do the same thing for this one as well. Here, there were Likert type responses like 1, strongly disagree, 2 disagree, and so on. As you know, all of these are the same in the questions below as well. If I select all of them like this and say paste, I won't have to write them again. Let me show it to you this way. Let me also point this out here. If we go to utilities up here and then select variables, we can see all the codes we've created here. Let me expand this a bit like this. If we click on gender, for example, 1 is female, 2 is male, and for age, we haven't entered anything yet. For education level, we can see all of them together like illiterate, primary school graduate, and so on. We can check here if we've made any mistakes. So, for example, when we come here, we see this again. When we come here, we see this. When we come here, we see this. We can review all of them from here. I'm closing this. After that, I want to move on to the other steps. I can proceed by narrowing this area like this. Next, what I need to do is enter the measure or measurement level from here. What is the measurement level? Actually, we have very detailed videos about this on our channel. If you don't know about it, you can watch them. I recommend you watch them. When it comes to measurement levels, we consider measurements in 4 steps. At the lowest level, there is the nominal measurement level. Above that, there is the ordinal measurement level. Above that is the interval measurement level. And above that is the ratio measurement level. As I mentioned, you can watch this topic in our related video. In SPSS, I also want to show you that there are 3 levels. Of these 3 levels, the top one, what we just referred to as the 3rd and 4th steps, the 2 upper levels, interval and ratio measurement levels, are expressed here as scale. Just below that is the ordinal measurement level. Here, it's also expressed as ordinal. And at the very bottom, there's nominal. In other words, this is the measurement level we just referred to as the classificatory measurement level. You can easily understand this from their symbols. Even if you initially mark all of these as nominal, you can still perform many operations. But if you don't mark some measurement levels as scale, you won't be able to perform certain mathematical calculations later on. That's why it's beneficial to select them correctly. Here's how we do it. We go to ID. Here, we first select nominal. Again, we select gender as nominal here. Why did we select gender as nominal? Because the categories of gender, male and female, are not ranked, meaning men are not 1 step above women, and women are not 1 step above men. The numbers 1 and 2 here are just codes we use to indicate the groups, and they are not on a scale either. Why? Because if we add 1 and 2 together and take the average here, for example, 1.5, 1.5 doesn't mean anything. Why? Because, as I just mentioned, 1 and 2 here are just numbers used to indicate the groups. These numbers don't serve any other purpose here. That's why we mark it as nominal. We can mark age here as a scale, because with age, we can perform all kinds of calculations like arithmetic mean, mode, and median. That's why we need to mark it as scale here. Educational level, which is also a frequently asked question, actually needs to be marked as ordinal, because there's a hierarchy here, a stepwise order. Illiterate, then above that primary school graduate, and above that middle school graduate. So technically, it's ordinal, but even if you select it as nominal, it doesn't really make a difference. But let's do it right anyway and select it as ordinal. We should select marital status as nominal, and then I want to say copy it here like this. And then I want to come here and say paste it to all of them. Up to here, it will be nominal. It will be nominal up to, let's say, having a TikTok account. Then, for the Likert type questions, starting with the institution I work at, we need to select scale, because we're going to do some calculations on these in a bit. You might ask, Can answers given categorically like this be considered scale? Actually, fundamentally and mathematically, they are not scale. Here, it's actually more accurate to call them ordinal, because here, the answers are ranked in a certain hierarchy. But since the answer type in Likert type questions is very strong, they can also be considered as scale. That's why we see that these are marked as scale. I selected one like this and marked all of them as scale. However, I should also mention this here. If you want to find out, for example, what percentage of participants chose each option, like what percentage said strongly disagree, what percentage said disagree, you won't be able to determine this when it's set as scale. In that case, you need to come here and change this to nominal. After changing it to nominal and obtaining the percentages here, if you later want to move on to mathematical calculations, you can change it back to scale. Let me just mention that here as well. I hope I haven't confused you. Alright, now I'm going to enlarge my screen like this. We've completed our data entry. I just want to take one more look at all of them. Let's end our lesson here. In our next lesson, let's continue by looking at how we can create different variables from this data and make some adjustments. I hope it was helpful. If you have any questions, you can ask them below the video. If you liked our video, I'd appreciate it if you could give it a like. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, I'd appreciate it if you could subscribe. I'd also like to take a moment to thank you all here. In our first video, our first lesson, we received a really high number of likes. I especially want to thank you for that. I wish you ease in your studies. See you in our next video.